Ever since I saw the Scooby Gang team up with Batman and Robin to catch the Penguin and the Joker when I was 4, I've been enamored with superheroes. There's just something engrossing to me about stories featuring people who have surpassed the limits of the body. And while I still love me a good Caped Crusader from time to time, my interests have shifted from crime-solving men who dress up in themed costumes to beat up the mentally ill, to more down-to-earth superhumans with an emphasis on the humans, like the X-Men, the cast of the first season of Heroes, and my all-time favorite, Spider-Man. And recently I've added one more set of down-to-earth superheroes to my list of the greats. The students and teachers from My Hero Academia. If you've watched any anime or anime-adjacent media at all in the last 2 years, you probably already know all about this rising star of Japanese media, and for good reason. My Hero Academia often reaches for the absolute pinnacle of storytelling. The fact that it does so through the lens of high schoolers with unique powers trained to be heroes and beating both villains and each other to a pulp is merely incidental. I've wanted to talk about My Hero Academia for a while, as there are several outstanding scenes to choose from, and with the third season of the anime wrapping up with my favorite sequence of the entire run, including the manga, now seems like the perfect time to do it. Also, a bunch of spoilers ahead, so if you're thinking about watching it and that bothers you, then you should go binge the first 3 seasons of the anime or 120 chapters of the manga. And if you aren't planning on watching it, then you really should be. Because this show is pretty fantastic, to the point where even my mom, who typically watches baking shows and comedic crime procedurals, enjoys it. So let's look at the moment that encapsulates the very essence of all good combat-oriented storytelling.
We're done here. I won this fight. You have All Might's power, but even using his strength, even after making it your own, somehow you still manage to lose to me. Why? How could you lose?
My Hero Academia is a long-form narrative, and that scene is the payoff for 2 character arcs that were established all the way in the opening moments of the series. So before we can dive into discussing why the scene is effective, we first need to understand the precise nature of the dynamic being portrayed here. My Hero Academia is an ongoing manga written by Kohei Horikoshi, the first chapter of which was published by Shueisha and Weekly Shonen Jump in July of 2014. An anime adaptation by Studio Bones began airing in April of 2016 featuring minor changes, mostly focusing on the exploits of tertiary characters that weren't fully explored in the manga. My Hero Academia tells the story of shy and meek but observant and crafty Izuku Deku Midoriya, and his transition from powerless fanboy to the world's #1 superhero. Despite being born with the incredibly unlikely situation of having no superpower, or quirk as they're called in Hero Aga's world, Deku aspired to be like his idol, the pillar of hope and current #1 hero, All Might. Eventually, Deku's determination and heroic nature, in addition to All Might's failing body, led to Deku inheriting All Might's quirk, One for All, granting him all the strength, speed, and agility stockpiled by its 8 previous holders in addition to his own. Deku's foil and biggest rival for the title of #1 is his childhood friend/bully Katsuki Bakugo. While Deku was unlucky enough to have no quirk, Bakugo won the genetic lottery with the ability to create explosions out of the sweat from his hands. Due to being constantly praised as a child for his incredible quirk, Bakugo developed a superiority complex that constantly brought him into conflict with the kind and caring Deku, who as the only quirkless and therefore weakest person around, still tried to help Bakugo whenever it looked like he was in trouble. As Bakugo sees Deku, who used to be a weakling that he could easily look down on, advance more and more in the use of One for All, slowly catching up to and even exceeding Bakugo's own abilities, his anger starts to boil over. This comes to a head when, after All Might's forced retirement in the wake of him expending his last vestiges of One for All to rescue Bakugo from the clutches of Crime Kingpin and All Might's mortal enemy All for One, Deku gets his provisional license, basically a learner's permit for superheroes, and Bakugo doesn't. This leads to Bakugo challenging Deku to an all-out fight after school, the climax of which is the scene I showed you earlier. This fight is incredible on several levels, but despite the excellent choreography and writing, the most impressive part to me is how it fundamentally matures the main character dynamic of the show in a very believable way while also serving as the payoff to every event in the story up to this point. It takes Katsuki Bakugo, who up until now has been an unlikable and combative jerk to just about every character in the show, and not only humanizes him, but makes him incredibly sympathetic, before ultimately reaffirming his goal of being the single greatest hero in the world despite his personality. Bakugo initiates the fight with a level of calmness that he hasn't shown this far in the story, and he chooses to fight Deku at Ground Beta, the site of their training exercise where Deku beat Bakugo by exploiting his emotions and straightforward battle plan. For Bakugo, this fight is a way to prove that his approach to the world is not just correct, but more correct than Deku's, despite the fact that Deku's been growing stronger and stronger and was even acknowledged by the strongest hero of all. And similarly, it takes Izuku Midoriya, who has always shied away from conflict, and still greatly admires Bakugo for his strength, and it forces him to confront and overcome the biggest obstacle in his life to prove that he is in fact worthy of taking up All Might's mantle. And in this case, worthier of being a hero than Bakugo, who couldn't pass the provisional license exam. This fight is the culmination of every step both of these characters have taken since they were children, and it's both exhilarating and fascinating to see how they've each grown and changed since then, as shown by the way they each go about fighting. But ultimately, the most important part of this fight actually takes place after it's over, when after being put under house arrest for fighting after school hours, Bakugo goes out of his way to help Deku improve his fighting style, proving that instead of regarding each other as enemies, they've both grown from this shared experience. They may not be friends yet, it wouldn't feel earned for them to put years and years of complicated and often negative feelings behind them, but now they're proper rivals who improve each other by competing instead of simply fighting to prove who's superior. Because like any good fight, the actual combat isn't what's important. It's what brought the fighters to the ring and how the results affect them afterwards that really matters. My Hero Academia starts with the same raw materials of every superhero story that's ever been written. Be it the costumes, the hero names, the arch nemesis with an inverse power of the protagonists, the young apprentice learning from the mentor who is now past his prime, or the usually simplistic moral message. But it takes all those tired pieces and reshuffles and refines them into an incredible story, where every single character, from the protagonist to the deuteragonist to the supporting cast and even the extremely villainous antagonists, experiences growth and change in a way that feels earned. This kind of long-form hero story often fails to capture that, resulting in a series with excellent highs but also awful lows. Even my other favorites in the superhero genre fall victim to this. After its first season, Heroes lost any real sense of logical growth in its characters, leading to boring story arcs and nonsensical power-ups and downs that only got worse as the seasons dragged by. And as for the X-Men and even Spider-Man, they switch out characters and get rebooted so often, in part to avoid having to develop their cast beyond a point where they're always immediately recognizable. Which led to an extremely mixed bag when it comes to their stories, and it's a rare thing indeed for them to do anything both new and engaging with any of those characters. But after 4 years and 200 chapters, Horikoshi is still finding fascinating ways to develop and humanize the cast of My Hero Academia, and I doubt that will slow down anytime soon.